Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back or welcome to the channel as usual. Today is a video that a lot of you have been anticipating, and that is the crossbow dagger guide. And I know that a lot of people have been waiting for this, but I'm going to be splitting this video into multiple phases, which is obviously your early game as you're leveling up to 50. And once you hit 50 and then end game, I'm going to show you a couple builds, and I'm going to leave them also down in the comments, and I'll pin it for you so that you can have access to it at any time. Do keep in mind that before we get into the builds and all that kind of stuff, I also want to give like a brief breakdown of the rotation and what exactly is your main focus as you play crossbow dagger, and then dive deeper into like which skills to level up first as you're leveling and all that kind of stuff. So with that out of the way, if you end up enjoying that kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get right into it. So for crossbow dagger, like basically it's the highest APM class in the game, for those of you that enjoy like the whole like, you know, smashing your keyboard kind of thing. And overall, your bread and butter is your mortal mark, which in this case is detonation mark, which I'll get into in a moment, and your quick fire. This is basically for the most part like what most of your rotation consists of. And obviously there are different play styles for the rotation and how you want to play it. Some people emphasize more on the crossbow, some people more on the dagger, some people kind of a middle ground, which is like in my case in PvE I play a bit of a middle ground. So if you look at my quick fire and my detonation mark, basically you need to pop your poison, which I'll explain in a sec, and then you use your quick fire, and the goal here is to pop quick fire as much as you possibly can and have the detonation mark basically explode for big damage. Now what plays a part in this is selfless diffusion. Whenever you have selfless diffusion, or whatever the skill is going to be called on global, this skill makes the cooldowns go down more when you have it on based on the skills that you land. So if let's say I use this skill right now, selfless diffusion, and I use quick fire, but then I use my knife throw, you can see that my quick fire went back off of cooldown. So you kind of like now get where this is going. So essentially you would pop your poison, click the detonation mark, which will basically deal like put the mark on the target. You'll press 4, which is basically like the quick fire, and then use your diffusion so that you can kind of like try to reset quick fire. On top of it, your V, which in my case like this V, the nimble leap, also resets quick fire in one of the nodes, which I'll show in a sec. So if I press 4, dash, it's reset, dash, it's reset. Once again, now you see the trend. So it's like quick fire is basically your bread and butter. We're gonna get into the dagger as well at some point, because dagger is like kind of like you weave it in for the most part. So now if I show the rotation properly, it's gonna look something like this. So here we go. 1, 4, dash, 4, dash, 4. Use your knife throw, reset your quick fire. Number 1, dash, 4, and then start putting in your dagger abilities if needed. So that is basically like kind of the rotation. So to kind of simplify it, you simply pop your buff, which is your poison, which I will explain once again in a sec. You put on the detonation mark. You use number 4, pop your selfless diffusion, then reset it with your nimble leap, quick fire, reset it, quick fire, and then throw the knife when still like selfless diffusion is up to reset your quick fire, and even your detonation mark again, then repeat. And once you're out of everything, you jump in, or still if you're close, you just like start using your dagger abilities. So once again, it's gonna look something like this. And you wait, you get this, and then close with your dagger, and then that's it. That's basically like your full rotation. That's why also like having cooldown reduction and all that stuff is also beneficial for the build, so that it also helps with this kind of like cooldown reduction. Now, in terms of obviously how to acquire these skills in the first place, that's the important part, because as you guys know, we now have the skill specialization system, which basically entitles these like trees over here and what you do with them. But before I dive into this, obviously we need to break down which skills are you even gonna level up as you are playing. Obviously from what you've noticed right now as I'm playing, quick fire is basically your main DPS, meaning that is the skill that you will be leveling up initially as your main skill. So this is the skill you will get from green to blue as fast as you possibly can, and from blue to purple also as fast as you possibly can. So quickfire is going to be the first active skill that you're going to be focused on, and selfless diffusion to try to get the offhand chance, and also to try to get these cooldown reduction as much as faster as you possibly can. So these two are going to be basically your bread and butter to level up alongside your Mother Nature Protist, which I'll explain in a sec what we're going to do with it in the skill specialization. And on top of it, initially for the AoE, you can use Cleaving Moonlight so that when you gather multiple mobs, you can kind of like use the cleaving AoE, because this skill actually does AoE dagger damage. And on top of it, you have Thundercloud and the knife throwing. Those are also pretty solid to level up. After you're done doing that, you can level up Mana Exchange for a better mana and Detonation Mark for that extra pop, because initially the damage pop is not really that high, so that's why I don't focus on it too much. That is in terms of your skills. The rest is up to you and subjective. At the end of the day, you want to get all of your skills to purple. The defensive skill that we're using is the Dagger skill, because when you use it, it gives you mana. So if you use the Dagger skill when you're standing still and block, it gives you mana if you block a perfect block, which is like the Fury attacks. And if you roll, you go invisible and gain mana while invisible. Fury attacks are basically, think of them as stuns or the purple circle attack that you see on the mobs. Now that is for the block. Now what about the passives? So the passives are honestly like the tricky thing, because it's very subjective what you want to do, because early on crits, for example, are very meh. You don't get much out of it. So I would recommend going for the poison, the assassin step, because the higher you get it, the more mana regen you get each time you get a kill, and you can run faster. And I would say focus then on the mobility, like here, because there's a lot of mobility anyway that you use. Nature's Power gives you bonus damage like flat number, which is really good. Also Piercing Strike is really good. So these two over here are pretty solid, and this one over here as well. And then you have these two, and then later down the line you can focus on your damage like crits and evasion and all that stuff for PvP. So this is at least what I would recommend you do. In terms of your skills, keep in mind these are my passives for PvE, and for dungeon bosses, like if it's like a single target, this skill only benefits from getting kills. If you're not getting kills, it's better to change it on the boss and put this here instead. So be aware of that. Now that is for the PvE setup. For PvP, there are multiple ways to play, to be honest. This seems to be like my favorite so far out of the single target ones. And obviously you need the evasion. These are like the most important ones for your evasion. And if you tend to have like very high evasion later down the line and people are missing on you often, I would recommend you also weave this in, maybe instead of this Eagle Eye or instead of this one. It's up to you basically, instead of Destructive Fang. This is at least my recommendation for the skills. Now for the rotation, we already broke down the skills. I explained how this works. In terms of PvP, mostly you have Phantom Smoke Screen. Phantom Smoke Screen is basically your bread and butter when you go in, because if let's say I go in and use Smoke Screen, I don't get hit by anything at all, and then I can go back out when necessary. That is like mostly how your playstyle is going to look like. Obviously all of this is impacted by the skill specialization. Now I'm going to showcase the skill specialization first for PvE and then for PvP, but keep in mind at the end of the day this is very subjective. People have different playstyles. Crossbow Dagger, generally speaking, is played by so many different people in so many different ways. So if let's say I'm going to reset this now so that I can go with you one by one. Obviously, I'm going to go off of the assumption that I do not have tier 2 because this crossbow resets my quick fire when I use Nimble Leap. But I'm going to go off of the fact that we do not have that on release, which is the case. We're not going to have it on release. So this is what you're going to be doing for PvE. For PvE, quick fire, as I mentioned, is your bread and butter. So you would want to actually maximize it. Detonation Mark is very subjective. You can have it if you want. If you want to use it, you can. If you don't want to use it, you can just leave it the normal Mortal Mark. That is up to you. Outside of that, these are very subjective. Some people like the Thunder one. Some people, like myself, like the Gale one to stack the Gale faster. And I personally think the Gale one is the better option for PvE and for PvE. The only option, the PvP and the PvE, the better option is Thunder when it's raining because then it spreads AoE. But outside of that, I think Gale is the better option. Here, I would take boost effects so that you don't have mana issues. As long as you feel like you have mana issues, I recommend you take this so that you can use mana exchange to take away from your health and give you more mana. But if you do not have mana issues, you can just not use this at all or not even use the whole skill at all. But initially, when you have mana issues, you should be using this because you will be having mana issues initially. Now, in terms of the Dagger, actually, first of all, you need in the Nimble Leap, you also need this one to make Nimble Leap available 2 times. And then you need this one, which will allow you to reset the quick fire as well. And in some cases, you could also use the Whirlpool if you want. I don't personally think it's that important. Some people think it's good. It's, once again, preference. People have different play styles. In terms of the dagger, however, inject venom. It's up to you whether you want to keep it as a venom poison or a thunder. I personally like the thunder cloud, which is the lightning infusion, for 2 reasons. 1, it looks cool, I'm going to be honest. And 2, it also shreds endurance, which makes you deal more crit, which is important for crossbow dagger. The second thing is I like to have this like consecutive 2 times so that I can use it twice in a row. I wanted to also apply thunder effect because the thunder effect is pretty strong. And then I like to take brutal incision to thunder effect as well, because the more lightning effects that I have on the target, the higher damage it's going to deal. But at the same time, I like to take the cooldown on it so that it allows me to pop that additional, you know, cooldown reduction so that I can actually use it more often. And outside of that, you can either take area damage if you want, if you are going to be doing AoE grind out and about, or you can take the proportional damage of the health, which also is strong, or the reset upon death, but this is like not really important unless it's PvP. I would take either this one, or I would take the attack speed for the extra attack speed when you use this skill. Initially, attack speed is not going to be that extreme, so I would honestly take the extra damage to kind of like to get a better buff. So now if I were to show the whole rotation for PvE, it would be something like this. Obviously keep in mind the ping as well, because the ping obviously in Korea is not the best. So this is basically like how the rotation is overall gonna look like, and then you're gonna like weave things in between based on what you have, and that's it. And as you can see, it's like pretty clean. This is with like 200 plus ping. With lower ping, it should look a lot better than that. Keep in mind though, if we do not have this passive on release, which should be the case, we should have it on release, but if we don't, we'll have something called Opportunist, and you should use that instead. But anyway, that is for the PvE. For the PvP, I'm more of a single target kind of player. You will be basically copying the exact same things that we had from the PvE, with the exception of, if we were to reset this, let me do this real quick. Let's say I'm going to be doing this. I personally don't like taking the immune. It takes you like, it gives you like 0.5 seconds of immunity. I never really noticed it working properly. Maybe because it was Korea, who knows? Maybe in global I'll play around with it and try it out. But for Korea, I never really got any use out of it. Outside of that, you'll take these as usual. Detonation mark is very subjective. It's up to you whether you use it or not. You have Gale as well. This here, remove CC, is very important, as this can let you break out of any form of CC, including sleep, if you have Selfless Diffusion with this node on. And outside of that, you then have the dagger. I like taking the Shadow Escape, because what this essentially does is that if I go in, I have 6 seconds to be able to go back out if needed, so that if things get like sticky, I can actually escape out of the fight. Another thing that I like to take is also Camouflage Immune to CC, so that I can go Invis and break out of CC if needed. And at the same time, Phantom Screen, this one allows it so that even melee attacks miss on you. And I like this because basically when you pop the Phantom Smoke Screen, any attack that comes your way is a miss. They don't land it on you, and that's why I think this is very, very important, so that it keeps you a bit safer as well. Now outside of that, you know that I like taking the Lightning Infusion, as I mentioned, and you can take things like maybe the Thundercloud Bombing, so that you can get that extra damage. And then with the last 3 points, it's up to you honestly what you want to do with it. You can invest it anywhere you would like. In this case, for example, I can put it in the mana cost efficiency, or I can put it in the cooldown reset on death, because I would like to use this in PvP. And then when you go to the PvP segment, this is how your rotation is going to look like. So these are the skills that I have. These are the skills that I also invested into. And then whenever you go in, let's say you take a target that you want to kill, you can just like use your rotation from far away. You can go like dash around, go in, pop this, pop your thing, the Phantom, and get out when needed. The Phantom Swift Screen will basically save you from that. Obviously I was not using the correct thing, because like I changed a couple things that were not supposed to be changed. So this is like actually the correct one. I need to have this here, and like that we are actually on the right track. Yeah, this is the correct one now. Let me just change it to this. There we go. All right, so basically you'll just like pop your Gale, you will use your Infusion, Selfless Diffusion if needed, if you want to engage, and then start popping. And once you want to go in, you pop your Smoke Screen, pop your skills from the dagger, and then get out. That is like simply the way I play it, like a mix of crossbow, a mix of dagger. There are ways to kind of capitalize more on the crossbow. There are other playstyles that capitalize more on the dagger. I'm trying to make it like as easy to understand as possible, but this is basically like how the rotation is going to look like and the things you can use. But keep in mind, once again, I recommend you play around with the skills and figure out your own personal playstyle and play accordingly. Now, in terms of gear, on the other hand, there are different things you'll be building because you'll have different phases of the game: early game, mid game, and end game. As you level up while you're playing and getting your green items, my recommendation is to have these items over here, as these, as you can tell, maximize your dexterity, and I think this is going to be the best one to maximize your dexterity out of. And I would recommend you go for something like wisdom as you're leveling initially, as that will help you out a lot more in terms of like keeping your mana regen up and also the cooldown speed. So this is what I would be going for as I'm leveling up, and all of these items are easy to craft by simply playing while you're leveling. I'm not obviously going to explain how crafting works and all that stuff in this video, but I might make a different video separately for the crafting as well, for those of you that want to know how the crafting works. Now, mid game, you would kind of like try to go for these. I made sure that a lot of these things are easy to acquire. You will get one of these two from the story anyway. The second one, you will get it easily as well by simply crafting. Let's say you get this one from the story, which is the dagger. Then you can craft 4 green crossbows to get this one from the lithograph. This one you will get from the story. You'll get this one from the story, and you'll also get this one from the story. And the rest is very easy to get. And you will get the litho portion ring from the lithograph. You'll craft 4 different green rings and put them in the lithograph book, and that will give you the litho portion ring. You want to trade this ring to the max because this ring is going to be the business slot for you for a while until you can access better rings later down the line. Once again, dexterity is like your go-to, so you would want to put everything to dexterity, preferably like even up to 40 in this case, because you don't want to use 2 points. Then the rest will go into wisdom initially so that you don't run out of mana. Once again, this is for PvE because initially your main focus is going to be PvE, so this is what you are going to be running for PvE in those 2 instances. Now, once you start getting to the end game, this is what I'm going to be aiming for, and this is basically going to be your PvP gear. Obviously, this one is from the dungeon. You can get this from the level 50 dungeons, which is really easy to acquire. That's why I have it included in here, because it's really easy to acquire. And when it comes to these items, most of the items that I included should be easy to acquire. In this case here, you'll take movement speed, and in here you'll take magic evasion, range evasion, and mana regen. So these are the items you'll get. This one is going to be easy to acquire from the open world dungeon grind. These 2 are from the level 50 instance dungeons. This one is from the level 50 instance dungeon. This one is also from an open world dungeon, which is really easy to acquire unless they change it in our version. And these will be from bosses, which you'll get down the line, but I think the Reaper was also added to one of the dungeons, if I'm not mistaken. Now, these here are going to be the tricky ones. This one is going to be easy to acquire from the instance dungeon. This one, open world dungeon. These are going to be from the pity pieces you get from the open world dungeons and instance dungeons. You'll be easily acquiring them. And then Taikan is going to be from one of the world bosses, or I think it was the Arc boss with the last patch as well. So this one is going to be the harder one to get, but these are going to be your end game. Any piece that you don't have out of these pieces, you are going to be filling with whatever piece you can get your hand on from the blue ones, so that until you can fill it with the purple ones. And then at the very end game, you will get the Belendir and Tivent if you can. Those are basically like your absolute end game. Now keep in mind, these stats over here are PvP stats. That's why I'm going 60 perception. But normally, whenever you're doing PvE, you should lower the perception to like somewhere around 50 or even 40, and pump everything else into your strength and wisdom, preferably your wisdom for the cool down speed. So it would look like something like this. I would just lower this to 40, and then I would pump everything into the wisdom. And obviously I would lower also the strength, as I don't need that much strength while I am leveling up. And then the rest goes into dexterity. That is how I would make it look like when I'm doing the PvE side of things. But as long as you're doing PvP, you don't need that much wisdom. You will lower your wisdom maybe to 30 even, and then pump your perception. Get your strength down to 30, because you don't need more than that for now. Then you have like 60. The rest goes into dexterity. and then just like that you are good to go. You could also feel free to lower down the wisdom a little more and pump your dexterity to 60, which was what I was doing earlier, and make it look like this. So that is obviously up to your own play style. You can play around with it and figure it out, but you need to make sure to have that extra 120 hit, because hit is really important. This is basically like all the gear. I'm going to share the link for you guys down in the comments. Once again, I'm going to have it public, and I hope this was straight to the point. Obviously in the future there will be things like runes, there will be the trait resonance as well. Those things I'm going to cover later in a different video once we have them available in global. But for now, this is basically what you need to consider. But do know that at the end of the day, crossbow dagger or any other build have so many different varieties with so many different focuses, some on range, some on melee, some on whatever, and you need to figure out your own play style. So whenever you use this guide or any other guide even for that matter, just take it with a grain of salt and take it as, okay, this is my personal preferred play style. Yours could be different, and there are so many different viable builds. 4 pieces Ghost Wolf is viable, 4 pieces Reaper is even viable, 2 pieces Reaper, 2 pieces Ghost Wolf is viable, 2 pieces Ghost, 2 pieces Reaper, 1 Mother Nature is viable. There are so many viable options in the game, and you should check what you want to make out of your own play style. Thank you for made it this far. I hope you found this helpful, and until the next one, peace.